Okay. Well, it's practically 16:30, so I'm going to open the meeting. Good afternoon and welcome to you all to today's licensing committee. I'm Phil Barnett, the chairman of the committee. I'm supported today by the members of the committee as follows. To my right, obviously the vice chairman, Paul Dick, Councillor Billy Drummond, Councillor Nick Carter, Councillor Nigel Foote, Councillor Paul Kinder, Paul, Councillor Jane Langford, Councillor Stephanie Stevenson, Councillor Louise Sturgis, Councillor Clive Taylor, and at the moment we're missing Martha Vickers and Owen Jeffrey councillors, so I'm not certain whether they're turning up. We're also supported by Julia O'Brien, Mrs. Vicky Rigdon, Riley Timoney, who is the new licensing officer in the rear. I'm sure you'll come across him during the next period of your time when you're obviously as members needing the support of licensing officers. Moira Fraser sat next door to him. They will be advising the meeting. I believe Sean Murphy is welcome to you, Martha. Is that correct, Moira? Sean is tied up on other things.
Chairman, he is busy this afternoon in another meeting, so I'm hoping he is going to join us virtually soon.
Thanks very much. To my left, Ben Ryan, he's in attendance as a clerk to committee, and the Zoom host is Gordon Oliver at the rear. The meeting is being recorded and live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public are able to follow proceedings. Please can I ask everyone present in this room to make sure when speaking to be loud and clear, so those at home can also hear. Can also make sure that you've put your mobile phones on silent, aircraft mode, or even switched off depending on what you tend to use at meetings. If we hear the evacuation alarm this afternoon, we must leave the building immediately at one of the exit routes, and I'm sure you are aware of which the exit routes are, and then proceed via a safe route, which is will be shown to us by the trained officers, and obviously make sure that you follow instructions that they are going to give to us if need be. Hopefully they won't need that to carry out. Please follow any instructions that they have given to you, and of course assembly point is in the Dolphin car park, which many of you are aware of for other reasons. Anyone requiring assistance, and I better probably say this, and I said it at a subcommittee the other day, I was probably the only one that needed assistance, but hopefully I won't do today. But you obviously need to get support from the trained officers. Do any members have any questions in relationship to the way that the meeting is going to proceed? Okay. We haven't been notified of any apologies, but obviously, as I've already mentioned, we seem to be one short with Councillor Owen Jeffrey at this moment in time. So if we can then move on to item 2, members. I'd like to look for a proposer for the licensing committee minutes, which were held back in July the 10th. You proposing that, Councillor Drummond? Do I look for a seconder? Okay, Councillor Foote. Do I have agreement round the table for that? Can I have a show of hands, please, for members that are present? Okay, thanks very much. Okay, do you want to formally abstain or?
Yes, I will.
Okay, cheers, thanks. Okay, you got that, fair enough. Okay. The only real matters arising were regarding the report of the Community Alcohol Partnership. I've been informed that this is delayed and it will obviously be put forward at the January meeting. And at the end of this meeting, we will be talking about the date of the January meeting. So we'll discuss that at the same time. If I can then formally move on to item 4, which is a statement of licensing policy. It's obviously a review of the policy. Sorry,
Chair, I've got a declaration of interest.
we haven't quite got to that.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair. Phil?
Sorry.
Yes, may I apologise for not sending my apologies to that meeting. It is recorded that I was absent, and I can only offer nothing but worthy. I was confused as to what type of meeting this was and that I should have been here. So I have to offer my apologies.
And apologies accepted.
Thank you.
It's happened in. It's happened in the past with other meetings when I think members find that there's a considerable number of meetings held in a very short period of time, and especially if it's a new committee that they've perhaps not been used to attending, and they haven't actually put the dates in their diary. And I would probably strongly urge anybody to do probably the same as me. I tend not to do it electronically. I tend to do it in the diary form, but I quickly look at the calendar of dates for the council for the whole period. And I must admit, I do try and work my holidays around it. Don't always work that way, but it is easier. But we'll come back to you, Councillor Sturgis. Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just, I've just been reminded, I'm so eager to move things forward that, of course, Councillor Sturgis was actually going to identify her in a personal interest, and I suspect it's the one that you actually mentioned last time. Is that correct?
Yes, it is, Chair. That's correct. For councillors that weren't present, my partner holds a personal licence, but I've looked through the papers and I don't think there's anything that would compromise my position. Thank you.
I mean, I'm not certain whether it's been sort of done on a historical basis where once it's been mentioned, it's actually continued on, or whether it's probably I would suggest if it's a case that you feel there could be something coming forward, it is to mention it. But if you feel that it's not perhaps appropriate at that particular meeting, then probably you wouldn't necessarily need to declare it. Now moving on to item 4, which is the statement of licensing, and which it's been reviewed, and obviously the consultation which has been carried out leading up to this particular point. And I'm looking actually on the screen, and I can see Julia O'Brien there eagerly waiting to present the report. So I'm going to hand over to you immediately, Julia, and it's over to you. So I'm not certain whether when you present the report, are you going to present the actual most recent one, or ask for questions specifically on any particular part of? You're going to refer to exactly the last one and then ask for general questions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think I was assuming that members had read the report in front of them. So in that we have explained that obviously it's gone out to consultation, as you so rightly said, and that we've taken on board the actually quite a lot of representations we had back. I think it was 47, which is great for members who remember that we've had in the past policies and things. We've had maybe 1 or 2, or if we were lucky, 3 representations back. So we've taken them on board, and they are in the main text of the report, which we have then further consulted with legal on. So we have come up with, in your bundle, we have an Appendix A, which is the draft report, if you like, in its comment state. So there's a lot of crossings out, there's a lot of comments and that kind of thing in there. We've also added in the responses that we have received as Appendix B, and then you have a clean copy of the proposed licensing policy as Appendix C. So apologies, there's quite a lot of paper there, for members to look through, but hopefully it gives you a feeling for what responses we received, what we've done with them, which makes it very clear, and how we've ended up with the current policy that has been suggested. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions, but obviously the purpose of tonight is to provide the licensing committee with the opportunity to consider the comments received during the consultation period and the suggestions we've made along with our legal colleagues of what we would put in the policy, and consider obviously any options that members would like to bring forward for us to add into the policy before it goes to full council later in the year. So thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Julia. I'm looking around the table now for comments, because I think the last point that Julia made is probably most relevant, is if there is any extra items which you think need to be either included, amended, or existing points already amended, now is the time, because obviously it's got to go for the full ratification of the council in due course. And this is probably the last opportunity for you to make any point. So looking around the table, comments, questions, points, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. A couple of comments. Firstly, important to say that the officers have done an amazing amount of very detailed work. It's a very complex area, so thank them for all they've done, whether I can see them or whether I can't, whether they're old or whether they're new, I don't care. Well done, everybody, so far. A couple of more general comments. In the, if you like, the introduction to the policy 4.10, and this is where you've reacted to one of the comments, and it talks about the council will actively encourage participation in the development and delivery of initiatives designed to protect the public. I've sat on a few subcommittees. I'm still obviously greener than quite a few other people, but I've been a bit surprised that that seemed to be, if you like, on the weak side. So I'm very pleased to see that included in there. From what was said just now, you want comments on the actual policy as well, yeah?
Please.
Yeah, so 7.3, and it's a question, but something I've observed. If one considers the licensed premises in the town centre or nearby, some parts of the town centre are very well covered, security-wise, for example, with really high-quality CCTV, and other areas are not and are of continual concern. So is it right or wrong for a subcommittee to differentiate a license application depending on precisely where it is in relation to the things I've just said?
Sorry, do you mean CCTV in the individual premises? Or
no, I do not. I mean, there are certain areas of the town centre where there is more difficulty late at night than others. And it's in part related to, in some areas, there's very, very good coverage of CCTV. Mm-hmm. Other areas, less so. And this is not a secret, is it? It's well known.
Yeah, the coverage of CCTV is not something that we, in terms of licensing, have any jurisdiction over. However, there is a group that I'm a member of, and also Thames Valley Police and other members of West Berkshire Council, who look at things such as the safety and security of vulnerable adults and violence against women. So there is quite a lot of work going on at the minute in terms of where people may find or may think themselves feeling vulnerable. I'm more than happy to have a chat with you, Councillor, after this group to explain a bit more about that. But there is a lot of work going on in the background, as you like, but it's not specifically for this licensing policy.
No, I understand that. Okay, I'll retreat on that. And one more thing, if I may. The list of consultees, you might expect me to say this. One of the 4 licensing objectives is to do with children, isn't it?
Yes.
Are we consulting? And that's, if you like, a quarter. To me, the list of consultees is light on children's interests. You might tell me I'm wrong. For example, education, either establishment or education departments not mentioned. The Children's Safeguarding Board is mentioned, but I just wonder if there might be better representation of children's interests since it's written large in the 4 objectives. It's a question.
Yeah, and that's certainly something that we could have taken on board. So the responsible authority is the Children's Safeguarding Board, which is obviously we consulted with them. But certainly going forward, the Education Board or whoever be the most appropriate authority, we could certainly circulate that to. And councillors, remember this is a living document. So although we've just updated it, it doesn't mean that we can't look at a review of it if something comes up that we or you would like us to look at again.
Okay, well, I'll leave that on the table, Chairman. I'm not sure whether others agree with the education side or not. Thank you.
Before I bring you in, Councillor Vickers, just quickly, Councillor Dick, in relationship to the town centre, I mean, going back over several years, and I was also involved, that there has been various different groups, whether it's town centre steering group or town centre, or whether it's a Newbury bid or whatever it might be, that they have all looked very closely at the sighting of the CCTV, the need, obviously the financial support that's required and all these sort of things. And I know Councillor Vickers were involved years ago as well. So and obviously we're looking at it from a licensing point of view, but other groups have looked at it closely as well. And I'm sure it's ongoing and it still will come up again. Councillor Vickers.
I think just on the point of involving young people that Councillor Dick has raised, the council does have a youth council, so that might be a vehicle of sort of getting through to young people, which is probably not widely known. It's not been going that long, but that might be a good vehicle for getting in touch with young people and hearing their opinions. And although it's, as you said, it's not appropriate to discuss CCTV here, I'm glad it's been raised because there is issues in our parks about when should we have CCTV. I mean, I feel a little bit uncomfortable at CCTV from the point of view of its infringement on people's privacy, but it seems to does serve a purpose where we have incidents of antisocial behaviour and again probably protection of children. So it's good to know that might be something that's discussed in another place. Thank you.
Any other questions of Councillor Foote?
Thanks very much, Chair. Yeah, just an observation that in the past I have been involved with Pub Watch and the bid, and going along to some of those meetings. Obviously the licensing committee or licensing members of West Berkshire Council attend those meetings, and its members might be interested to know that there's quite a lot of in-depth discussion that goes on amongst Thames Valley Police, the publicans and licensing. And I think I can reassure everybody that there is a lot of background information, background work that's done to protect people, in particular young people and now, young women as well. Thanks.
Looking around the table, right, okay, Councillor Langford first and then Councillor Tate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It concerns me, of course, being a ward member for Purley-on-Thames, which is right near to Reading and quite a long way from the CCTV we've just heard about in Newbury. So I wonder, is there scope for a general policy on the area that licensing should or should not be granted? I don't mean that it should never be granted, but is there a general need for a general policy on the security aspects of everywhere in West Berkshire, not just Newbury?
I think that's obviously the last 2 points were actually observations, Julia, and that's why I never brought you in. But in this case, Councillor Langford is clearly referring to other parts of the district other than Newbury. So I don't know whether you respond on that at all.
I think the main thing to say was that every application that we would get in for a premises licence needs to be considered on its own merits. And and that would be on the 4 licensing objectives. So if there were concerns from any of the responsible authorities to that, then they would make comments and representations to an application. And if that included security of people, which is to be fair, primarily within the premises, but also has there's been plenty of discussion in the past on how far this goes, if you like. But that's certainly something that they would consider when making representations, and then something that they would bring to a subcommittee of the members for further consideration. But yes, it's certainly something for, I would say, discussion with our police colleagues. And for example, the bid as we have here, and any other similar parish councils and other bids within the area.
Okay, you happy
Thank
with?
you, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Taylor.
Yes, I've got a question on, it's the section headed representations and mediation. Item 9.1, where relevant representations have been submitted, the licensing authority shall aim to facilitate negotiations. I wondered if you could expand on exactly how that facilitation is put into practice. You know, is an email sent to somebody, or is there actually an actual discussion between the 2 parties? I mean, don't get me wrong, I fully support this idea. I think it's a very good idea. And I'd also be interested to know to what extent, this facilitation has worked in the past. You know, what proportion of applications don't go to the panel because the facilitation results in an agreement between the different parties.
Okay, that's fine. So what we try to do is we work with applicants before they make a representation, if at all possible. Very often people would phone up and say, I'm thinking about doing X, Y, or Z. And we would say, okay, talk us through it. And maybe you want to think about, you could put this kind of condition on your application that would perhaps mediate some of the responsible authorities' concerns. And we would also suggest that if it was a quite a hot topic or something, then they would actually speak to the responsible authorities and get a feel for what kind of things that they may accept before we actually get the application in. So once we get the application, obviously what that doesn't do is give the sort of members of the public their chance to have representation at that point, and that discussion necessarily with the applicant. So if we then had representations coming into us, we would, on receipt of them, we would send them to the applicant. That normally takes the form of an email, but we then would usually follow that up with a telephone conversation. Depending on the number of representations, we may look at doing some kind of group mediation, talking through the applicant, maybe in the past, we've had meetings in the local town hall or a community centre with all the people who wish to make representations, so that everyone can hear each other's side of the story, and the sometimes just the written application doesn't explain everything that the applicant wants to make clear to people. So sometimes having these meetings actually reassures residents, if you like. So yes, very much so. We do try to mediate things out if at all possible, so that things don't need to go to a hearing. So, obviously that's everybody's time that's being taken up if we do have to go to a hearing. But obviously if we can't mediate out, then yes, we have to go to a hearing. And I thank our members all for volunteering so willingly, because in recently, and I can't think of a time it's happened since I've been working at probably the council, we have had an awful lot of representations to the applications that we've got coming in. So members will know that they've been volunteering for panels quite a lot recently. But I assure you, we do try and mediate them. So hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, you're happy with it? Okay.
Mine is extremely mundane. On page 9, section 6 on the licensing objectives, picking up 2 spelling errors. I said it was mundane. So 6.3, you've got initiatives twice, but the first one hasn't got its second T in. And then in 6.4F, we've got airst aid equipment. So that page has a gremlin.
Thank you very much, Councillor. You wouldn't believe how many times we've read this. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you, Councillor Stevenson. Councillor Kanda.
Hi, just a quick question. 3.6, in particular, the large scale or new events. Is there a definition of what large scale is? Because we're suggesting people should contact the safety advisory group before making the application.
I'm happy to answer that if it'll help, Julia. There's specific guidance on our website, Councillor Kanda, for when things would go to the safety advice, well, when we would recommend that things come to the safety advisory group or not. It's usually around 500 people, which relates to the temporary event notice applications, doesn't it, Julia?
Yes, yeah, it does. Thank you very much.
So we use that as the gauge for what should go to SAG. But if an organisational group wants to come along to speak to the safety advisory group, we would never preclude them from doing that, because it's a really useful forum for them to engage directly with Thames Valley Police, the South Central Ambulance, highways. All sorts of officers are all in the same place. So we do have some of our regular customers who like to come back when they are planning an event, to come to the safety advisory group, because they find the advice that they get there very useful.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, Moira.
Are you happy with that? Okay.
Yes.
Goes first and then okay.
Sorry to come back again. I was just something that I don't know whether it's appropriate to raise this here, but it's about a specific event last night which caused a lot of distress, actually, and I'm wondering how the licensing process went on for that. The fireworks display at Newbury Showground, which obviously was extremely poorly managed and ended up with roads being clogged up for several hours. Myself and my husband were taking our grandson to the airport to go back to his home in Bangkok. And we were in danger of missing the plane and had to take a very circuitous route to get out of the traffic jam. And there were postings about distressed families who'd been in a blockage for 2 to 3 hours. It sounds as though this was extremely poorly managed, whoever organised it. And I wonder what the licensing process was there and whether it was stringent enough.
Firework displays aren't actually licensable, so there isn't a license for it. But it's certainly something we do have regular meetings with the racecourse about their events in general.
This was the showground. This was Newbury Showground.
Showground. But yes, we do have regular meetings with those as well, and more than happy to raise that with them next time we have a meeting with them.
That would be good.
Chairman, from the chair, Councillor Vickers. I mean, I think you raised a very relevant point, but perhaps not for this particular forum. And I think we need to bear in mind, of course, that these sort of managed events quite often centre around traffic management processes and procedures, which should have been already in place. And I'm not aware of that particular event and what arrangements have been made, but invariably, normally it is some arrangements have been made. So I think it needs to be taken out of this particular committee. Did you want to make a comment on the same thing, Vice Chairman?
I just wanted to agree with you. It's not appropriate for this committee at all, but it was in my ward. I live very, very close. I'm well aware of the chaos, not of my colleague councillors suffering, but lots of other people suffering, and I'm pursuing it through the right channels. And I'm not the only one.
Okay, thank you. It just occurred to me that what the process was. Okay.
Right, Councillor Carter, I did have you, so don't worry. Okay.
All right. Hi there.
Over to you.
Yeah. Just again, just minor. When the document is released, which I assume the hot links will work because they don't in that draft, and equally on section 3.1, I guess it would be nice if the where it says the relevant application forms, it then launched into the relevant applications forms rather than just what appears to be giving you the contact details for licensing services. But that was all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the forms are on the website, so we can easily put that link in. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Could I ask through you to the officer, you mentioned that this is a living document and that adjustments or modifications can be made. Could you just outline the actual process of that, please? You know, what is the mechanism by which members, if they had a concern, could forward it through, you know, so that maybe a modification could be made to the regulations? Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Chair, would you like me to answer that?
I'm more than happy. I mean, I don't know whether Moira wanted to actually come on that specific point. It's probably more relevant for Moira than yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, do you like to start, Moira?
We could when the report goes to council, if there were minor amendments to be made, those could be perhaps delegated to the relevant officer in consultation with the chairman of licensing. But in the main, this report, this particular set of licenses in the scheme of delegation requires the council to sign off the policy, so that would include any changes. But we could include a line in the council version of the report saying that minor amendments could be delegated.
I think in regarding today, Councillor Foote, and this is where I was going to sum up in a few minutes, that obviously there's been a lot of observations made and questions of Julia, but I'm really looking around the table for specific points that you might wish or might not wish to be actually be included at this particular time, because I think it's quite important. I mean, the Vice Chairman did talk about comments about being light on certain areas, didn't you, in one of your questions? So I'm probably looking around the table to seeing if there's any specific points other than the questions you put to Julia that you would like points, either strengthening of certain paragraphs or additions at this particular point. Because when I put the proposal forward, it needs to be included in any of these last minute amendments.
Chairman, can I just go back to the education comment I made? And I'd like to see, not necessarily with Young People's Council, although that's a good idea, but it's another angle to represent the interests of young people other than the Safeguarding Board, which I know has someone from education, but it's a very limited scope, I would personally say, given that I think 52% of our population is the people I'm talking about.
Moira, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, so that's a very well made point, Councillor Dick, and we'll take it in consideration for the next time that we go out to consult, but we've already consulted now, so we can add them to the list of consultees going forward. Thank you.
I think we've had a quite an interesting, not necessarily debate, but points raised, and also, of course, what also is valuable is is for me to grasp that some of you have actually taken the time to spend looking at the detail on this most recent draft, because that was obviously a concern previously that papers were being circulated and members were not getting a chance to actually thoroughly go through the papers. So I commend you for that. So really what I'm looking for around the table is looking for a proposal to recommend this policy, and at this moment in time it looks as if it's without any modifications, so we're looking for a proposal in 2.3.
Chairman, I'm happy to so propose, except that the addition to the consultees for the future. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Seconder to that, please. Okay, Councillor Foote. All those in agreement, please show. Okay, I think that's unanimous, and Thank you very much. Now, moving on to the licensing fees and charges. I'm now looking at Moira Fraser, who's going to introduce this particular item. But probably before that, I probably should have just asked. There's no on the remotes, Gordon. There was no other member, was there? Because I really should have given the chance to any other member. I was just worried in case Owen Jeffrey had actually was on the Zoom. Okay, right. Moving on then, Moira, to your item 5, which is the report on pages 87 to 114. Can you introduce the report, please?
Thank you, Chairman. This report explains how we have derived the fees which are proposed to come into effect on the 1st of April 2024. It also seeks comments from the committee on those fees and sets out the procedures for consulting on a specific set of fees which we are required to do under the relevant legislation. The fees set out in the appendix to this report were considered by the Joint Public Protection Committee, who are charged under the Inter-Authority Agreement for doing so, at their meeting on the 2nd of October. The PPP charges 2 types of fees. The first set of fees are the statutory fees, which are highlighted in gold on your papers, which clearly we are not able to change. And then the discretionary fees, which we will be discussing this evening. All discretionary fees are set on the basis of the time taken to administer the fee multiplied by the hourly rate. A range of factors are taken into consideration when setting that hourly rate, including the wide variety of council support services and their costs, staffing and associated costs, democracy and governance, contracts, equipment, software, accommodation costs, and the necessary training to maintain a competent workforce. The JPPC agreed to recommend that the hourly rate be increased from £64 an hour to 68.25%, £68.25, an increase of 6.7%, which was based on the CPI at the end of August, when the fees were starting to go through the process. The statutory fees have in the main not increased since about 2011. And this is one of the factors that has been contributing to the shortfall in income within the licensing service. Members will be aware that it has recently been agreed that the statutory planning fees will be uplifted, with major planning fees being uplifted by 35% and the remainder at 25%. And it is proposed that the chairman write to the government to lobby them to do something similar in terms of licensing fees. The legislation around taxi licensing requires the private hire operator and hackney carriage and private hire vehicle license fee. So it's a very small subset of the fees, about 5 of them, and that they have to be subjected to a statutory 28-day consultation period. The committee is asked to consider the dates and the methodology for the consultation, which is set out in paragraph 4.12 of the report. Officers are proposing that we will write to the trade, the local taxi trade, that we put notices up at the Market Street offices, put the consultation on the website, both the Public Protection website and the West Berkshire website, and support this with social media posts. In addition, there is a requirement that the notice is placed in at least one local newspaper. Members are asked to decide if we should continue to put these notices into both the Newbury Weekly News and the Reading Chronicle. This has historically cost around £500 for the Newbury Weekly News public notice and about £1,000 for the Reading Chronicle. Officers would comment that the majority of comments that we do receive back on this consultation tend to come from the trade and through the community panel, and we don't get an awful lot of business, so to speak, from the public notices. The remainder of the fees would be subject to any consultation undertaken by the council on fees more generally. Happy to take any questions that members may have.
Okay, members, we're obviously looking at the papers that are associated with the fees which have been highlighted by Moira. Now, we obviously note the charges within Appendix A, but I'm interested to hear any views on Pacific way that we've come to the decision on the percentages up to this particular point, and I think this is relevant for you to make your observations at this particular time in view of what has happened in the past over a period of time, and also we need to look at the aspects of what it's costing the authority to undertake these various functions, and also, of course, the possible loss of revenue as well. So over to you, members. Questions tomorrow. Councillor Stevenson.
Yes, I wondered if you need a separate proposal to agree with you writing about the statutory fees and that they haven't increased since when Moira said, and that we as a committee would endorse you writing to government to say they need to be increased in line with the increase in planning fees, 35%. So do you want that separate proposal?
Well, there will be a request for me as a chairman to obviously write formally. But you know, that if that's the wish of the committee, then obviously that's what the process would be in relationship to that part of the equation.
Thank you.
Councillor Carter.
Yeah, I've just got one which may be slightly left field. It's just that I have heard that private hire drivers are facing challenges in areas of the country where the 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is in place, effectively meaning their costs have gone up. Is that relevant here, and has that been taken into account in coming up with the fees?
I'm going to look at Moira for this particular point, because it's probably quite not so relevant as the areas that you're specifically thinking of, but nevertheless, Moira.
So in terms of the fee setting, the way the fees are set is based on the work it takes for the officers to produce that particular license. Separately, the trade has the ability to request that their tariff, so in other words, their fares are changed. And we are aware that the trade are facing significant issues. The 20-mile-an-hour speed limit is not something that's been raised with us, but it is a point well made. But they are obviously fuel costs are on the rise again. And one of the other things that is coming into play for them is like insurance costs. I don't know. I recently had to change my insurance, and the insurance costs have gone up significantly. So we are aware that their costs are coming up. And what they tend to do is they come to us with a proposal about changes for their fares. They haven't done that as of yet, but fare setting is all done on speed and time taken. So the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit, I'm not entirely sure exactly how that would affect them, but we have a really good relationship with the trade when we're talking to them about their fares, and that's something that we could certainly discuss.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Vickers.
Sorry. Yes, I mean, it's obviously we've got such poor public transport in our area that a lot of people do depend on taxis, don't they? Where in other areas they might have, better public transport. And obviously what we do, I know that the fares are separate, will influence the rise of the fares. So it is a difficult one, but obviously we have to cover our cost. As regards the posting of the Newbury Weekly News and the Reading Chronicle, I think Moira basically said that you get little response from that. So it doesn't sound as though that is money well spent as regards publicity, and that's probably otherwise ways of publicising what we're doing. I mean, maybe using social media more, which isn't so costly.
Are you suggesting that we ought to consider both the Chronicle and Newbury Weekly News?
No, I mean, I think the suggestion was that are we getting value for money out of that? Have we done that in the past, or is this an option for the first?
It has been undertaken in the past, but of course, as we move forward, and I'm sure you're aware, and other members of probably think very much similar, that the method of notification of people in all walks of life is changed a lot in the last few years. And we need to obviously make sure that everybody is aware of what is being proposed. But having said that, we also must be mindful enough of the cost implication to the authority in relationship to, are we getting to everybody of expense? And considering Newbury Weekly News has been reasonably consistent on their increase on their prices over the last few years, Reading Chronicle has gone like this. And it's and I'm looking at members to the east probably more than the members to the west. But having said that, are we actually getting through to everybody that is required to be consulted? And we have to perhaps question that in view of how people get their information these days, and not necessarily through hard copies of papers.
And it is quite costly, and if it's not effective, is it value for money? So do we really want to do that, or think of other ways of getting the message out?
Okay, Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a range of things going on here, some more important than others. First of all, there's been a bit of chatter about the consultation, and we can use social media and the council's standard information giving methods more. Certainly, personally, we should only be dealing with one newspaper. It's tiny, it's silly. They do have shops in the east, I believe. They do sell the Newbury Weekly News. I hear from the officers that we get almost nothing back from the newspapers. It's something just we are required to do, so we should do it to a minimum. Secondly, what we're really asked to do here is scrutinise the rationale for the various fee increases. And you know me, Chairman, I've tried very hard to find fault in it, but I have to admit failure. The only thing I would say, and therefore I am very supportive of these increases and the very clear and rational basis for doing it. Most of them are, well, if not statutory, very close to that in any case. The only point I would make is going forward, we need to keep our eye on competitiveness. So we just need to keep our eye going forward over other local authorities and what they're doing. We're not in direct competition for a lot of these services, but there is an element of that. But that's for the future rather than for now. I'm very supportive of this report.
And I think what Vice Chairman said is very, very relevant at this particular point. And a lot of time is spent by the officers doing comparisons with not only surrounding authorities, but far afield within the UK as well, to make sure that we aren't out of sync, because I think it's imperative to make sure we are. And furthermore, if we're not, then of course, the various trades will be on our backs considerably. So, yes, thanks that, Vice Chairman. Councillor Stevenson.
And following on from that point, I think we also need to know that in 4.11, it says it is not permissible for one aspect of the licensing regime to subsidise another. So yes, we have to remain competitive, but we have to recover our costs. Thank you.
And I think you're absolutely spot on there, Councillor Stevenson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There's I believe it's a typo on page 11 or page 107 on the 2024 to 2025 fee. I think there may be a typo there. A small point, I accept. The reason for my question is I accept that perhaps we're not allowed to put up the fee for dog fouling, but we are putting up the fees for scrap metal. And I wonder whether environmental considerations with regard to scrap metal have played a part or not. It looks to me as if they haven't, and should they? Collecting in and getting rid of and dealing with and recycling scrap metal is an environmental benefit.
Moira.
Chairman, just to say, so in terms of, well spotted on the typo, Councillor Langford, in terms of the scrap metal licensing, what we're charging them for is the the cost of issuing them a license. It's not about the wider kind of ethos around recycling. Obviously, it's something that the council would like to promote, but that wouldn't fall into the licensing regime of the council. And in terms of the dog filing, it's a fixed penalty notice and it's a statutory fee, so it's not something that we have consulted.
And perhaps you need to take note of the typo. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Is that okay? You're happy, Councillor Langford? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I am indeed. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Councillor Taylor.
Yeah, just to make a comment really on the, as a representative of the Eastern area and someone that buys the Newbury Weekly News and the Reading Chronicle every week. So I have to buy two papers to find out what's going on in my area. Sorry, you may have mentioned this earlier. How low is the response or has it been in the past from the Reading Chronicle? And secondly, I think there is at least one other weekly paper now being published in Reading. And, could we look at an alternative and perhaps cheaper publication where this could be advertised? I can't immediately think of the name of it, but I'm looking at you, Jane. There is another weekly paper in Reading. Oh my goodness. Yes, there is. Well, there is. I know I've seen it and I've bought it.
Usually Facebook
Yeah.
obliterates all
Yeah.
requirements.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Happy to take on board looking for the other paper. We don't sort of tend to ask, and perhaps it's something we should do in the consultation this time, is to say, where did you hear about this? Because I suspect in terms of public notices, that will be zero, because I think most of us read the paper. Most of us don't look at the public notices in the newspaper. It's a well-known fact that there is sort of government support of local newspapers through the fact that they require us to place things in public notices. If that wasn't a driving factor, I don't think there would be legislative requirements to do it anymore.
Okay. Yeah, happy with that. Councillor Stevenson.
Sorry, yes, may I ask as a point of interest, the new driver licenses include not only a test, which we'd understand, but also safeguarding and disability training. It's mentioned several times. Who carries out that training? That's not West Berkshire authorities' remit.
So in terms of the fees, there's a couple of organisations, and there are on our website that we direct the trade to. So for example, there's a company called Blue Lamp that does the training, but we are looking to bring that in-house because it's part of the fees. Obviously, it will reduce our costs if we are able to provide it ourselves rather than going out and paying contractors in effect to do that work for us. So there's a lot of work going on getting trainers within the team trained to be able to deliver that training.
And do you think we're already equipped with people trained to offer that training?
Not necessarily within the PPP at the moment, but there are offices across the council. So safeguarding training, for example, is delivered by adult social care or teams that work with adult social care and children's services as well. So those officers are training officers within the PPP to do that work.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for that question, Councillor Stevenson. Both the Vice Chairman and myself did actually raise that point at our pre-briefing as well. So you're thinking in the same direction as ourselves as well. So thanks very much. Are we exhausted on questions? Everybody's happy with it or what's in the report? If everybody is, then obviously I'm going to look round the table for a proposal under 2.2. But do we need to raise that? Okay. Right, okay. I've just been reminded on a background information so that you are totally fully aware of the position, although a lot of these points have already been addressed. We're obviously required to undertake this statutory consultation of both hackney carriage and private hire vehicles, and also private hire operator fees. So regarding the proposal, The fees and private hire operators and Hackney carriage and private hire vehicle licences are subject to the statutory consultation period, which will be from the 23rd of November until the 21st of December this year. We've already mentioned on the issue regarding public notice regarding the advertising. And I think the point that probably we do need to be firm, are we going to say, is it one paper or is it two papers? So I probably need to get a firm clarification from members on that. I mean, you were suggesting really that there's a benefit for the East on the Chronicle, whereas of course I did make the point initially that it was a case that you know, it was quite a considerable extra outlay for this authority. So really, in the conclusion of the resolution, obviously we need to make sure that we are advertising either one or two. So can I just have clarification on that round the table?
You want a number, Chairman? One.
One, okay. Does that find favour totally round the table? Is that nod of heads?
I mean, I think I'd probably abstain.
Okay, all right, okay.
Sorry, can I just remind everyone to use their mic?
We do need to make sure that we're in a majority on that. Okay, all right. And also a consultation letter is posted to all taxi and private hire drivers and obviously private hire operators in the district, which of course they will then be aware of the position. A copy of the consultation is posted on the Public Protection Partnership website and also on the West Berkshire's Council's consultation hub, and it will be obviously in the reception of the offices at the front of this building. If no objections are received, the charges for operators and vehicle licenses fees are included in February 2024 Executive and March Council papers, bearing in mind that we will have a there will be executive in February to discuss it, and then finally on our March, and I forgot which day it is, March, I'm not certain when it's 16th, but it's our full council. The papers will be considered at that particular time. Okay, and or obviously, if objections are received, they will be considered by the licensing committee at the next meeting, which again, I should talk about in a few minutes, relationship to the particular date for that day. Okay, so I think you were proposing.
Yeah, I'm happy to, as per the discussion.
Okay, and does that find a seconder? Okay, Councillor Vickers, all those in favour, please. Okay, thank you very much. Okay. And then we move on to item 6, which will be a follow-up regarding the discussions that were held at the taxi and private hire liaison group meeting, which was held a week or so ago. And I had the pleasure of being the only councillor there, but I think it's probably relevant for the officer Moira to actually make her observations, and then perhaps I'll make a few closing points at the end. Over to you, Moira.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll keep this introduction short because I know we've been through quite a lot this evening already. The Chairman, as he mentioned, and officers, 4 officers met with the trade on the 23rd of October. The meeting was attended by 3 members of the trade. The main agenda items for discussion at the meeting were the fees that we've just been through, the potential modifications to the taxi trades fares, so the Hackney carriage fares, and to provide an update on the taxi policy. The notes from the meeting have been circulated to you all outside of this meeting, but it's a private meeting. They wouldn't be included with the agenda pack, but we have summarised the events of the meeting in the report. In respect to the taxi policy, the trade were informed that work is ongoing and that we're hoping to bring a report to the January meeting. The trade have not, as yet, as I mentioned already, submitted any proposals around fare increases for next year, But if or when they do, then we will work with them closely, because it's quite a convoluted process that it has to go through. This report has to go to the executive, then we have to go out to consultation. If we have objections, then it's got to come back to committee. So we will work with them to make sure that we steer and guide them to get the proposals through the meetings as needs to happen. The trade didn't raise any specific comments on the fees at the meeting. There weren't any fees that they particularly wanted us to reduce. They made some comments on value for money, which you would expect them to do, but no, they didn't dispute any of the fees that were put forward. We've also been having discussions with the chairman and the vice chairman about the efficacy of these meetings. They're attended by around 1% of the trade, where people are often raising concerns that are specific to themselves rather than more general matters. So there is a discussion going on about how well those meetings are working. And that's all I have to say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Myra. I think on the last point which Myra made is the relevance of a meeting which in effect just involves just the one or two individuals that have got their own opportunity to express personal issues and not general points across a wide variety of drivers or their own company. The big companies tend to be more happy with the process and procedures that are being required of them. Whereas the individuals obviously see that as a great opportunity to meet up with officers or members and express little personal points which they feel could be deemed to be a bit of a gripe. We really need to look at the benefit of these particular group meetings, whether it should be done in some different format. So we've in effect taken it away for consideration. So unless members have got anything specifically on that particular point, you probably took note of the notes that were circulated. I think you did circulate them, didn't you, to all members? Yeah. We'd obviously be keen, both me and the vice chairman, if there's any, and obviously officers, if there's any points you feel ought to be addressed. Okay, well, thanks very much. Right, you've been quiet, Councillor Drummond.
Well, my question's already been asked. I mean, it's 4.9 in the report. It's been proposed during the discussions that current bears relation to filing charges. How did they take to that? How did the filing charges, how did the taxi drivers take to that?
So, Chairman, just to say that obviously last year when we had the filing, we've had a lot of discussion actually at the licensing committee around filing charges. And what we were going to propose to the trade when they bring through their request, and I from informal discussions, I think it would be well received, is that we have a scale of the filing charges, because the filing charges really are there to address the fact that, if you have somebody who has spills or there's some sort of an accident in a vehicle at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, that's a very different proposal to something that happens, at 11 o'clock on a Monday morning where they can go to a garage. In London, you have companies that are specialised in servicing taxis, so they can take them all 24 hours a day and get their vehicles cleaned. But clearly, if that happens in West Berkshire, that's not really an option that's open to them. So we have been speaking to them and linking the filing charges to the tariffs. So the tariff 1, which runs until 10 o'clock at night, tariff 2, which is from 10 o'clock at night until 5 in the morning, or 6 in the morning, and then sort of the tariff 3, which is really around Christmas and New Year. So I know that the trade would welcome that, and when they bring through their proposals, Councillor Drummond, that we'll go through that with them again and look at the level of charge that is set as well.
Thanks for that comment, Councillor Drummond. I mean, I know not only yourself, but other members have obviously felt quite strongly about that particular subject. And it's one that has to be delicately, discussed, because you can, in effect, use some terminology which is not perhaps ideal, but nevertheless, we've also got to think of the poor drivers and the owners of vehicles that need to clean their vehicles, and the way that they could be taken out of service for a long period of time, and the loss of income to that particular individual or company. So yeah, it's an ongoing subject, I might add. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a very quick one before we leave this. Regarding the public consultation, I mean, I can completely understand that, you know, you'll probably get the same people coming along to the meetings, or there'll be constant gripes. But I do think it is important that we still have an avenue by which the taxi drivers can have a face-to-face meeting with the officers, and they feel that they can approach the officers and thereby, you know, feedback to the council. It is a tricky one, I know. The other thing I was going to say is that often taxi drivers, of course, work all sorts of hours. So, you know, there may well be taxi drivers that are doing a different day job that won't find it easy to come along to meetings during 9 to 5 hours. So I'm sure you'll be well aware of all of this, that it's a difficult population to capture. But I do think we need an avenue whereby the public feel they can go and have a face-to-face with the officers. Thanks.
Yeah, again, Councillor Fott, I think you know you've made points which we had already looked at very closely, and you know we recognise, as well as obviously you do, that it is a 24/7 operation, and whatever time you arrange something, not everyone's going to be available to attend. But also, we feel that you need to have some consistency on the type of representation of the individuals that come, so that they are speaking, you know, not only as an individual, but, you know, as part of the organisation, the trade that they belong to. Also, furthermore, you know, your point of you don't want to close an avenue, no, nor do we. But we need to look at it very closely about what that avenue will consist of, because I think we do need to consider that in the future as well. Councillor Kanda.
Just quickly, I just noticed when there was one question about 4.9, is there's a spelling mistake. Proposed is prosed. That's all. Thank you.
I think we've exhausted that point, which obviously then brings me on to the other point, which is also relevant, because January the 8th was the date, which is the next taxi liaison meeting proposed in the diary, and the next full licensing committee would have been on the 22nd of January. I find it very difficult to attend on the January the 22nd. I would very much like to make sure that I'm available to attend the next meeting, and I'm going to make a suggestion from the chair, subject to whether it meets the approval of members around the table. That's between chairman and vice chairman and obviously officers. We're looking closely at the 8th of January, the date that was proposed initially for the taxi liaison meeting to become the full licensing meeting of the beginning of 2024. Has anybody got any objections to changing it from the 22nd to the 8th of January? I don't know where you're looking at diaries at the moment.
What time?
Same time. I mean, that's an interesting point, Councillor Kanda. We have had discussions about timings, and the timings were very much set around members that had parish council or town council evenings on a Monday to make sure that they were available to attend, perhaps at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. And by having it at 4:30 as we do, obviously that gives you the opportunity to attend your own parishes or own town councils. Right.
I'm just looking at the electronic phone. I'm already seeing a licensing committee there on camera.
That was basically a taxi liaison meeting. So you might have just put that down as license when.
I'll admit I've slightly preempted this, so.
Chairman, can you please get hold of Big Brother for me?
Is that clarified it now for you? Okay, thanks, Councillor Tate. Because I think today we've had a good attendance and we got a good contribution from you. So I think it's I want to make sure that everybody got that opportunity to attend as many meetings as possible. So on that point, members, I formally conclude proceedings. Thank you all for attendance, and hopefully the members that will be able to attend the subcommittee in the next round. We've got subcommittee next week, possibly there's definitely the 8th of December, correct?
Correct.
And we've also just had 2 new licensing applications in the last few days. So not preempting, but just hoping that they will go through without any objections. But if there is any objections, then it could be 2 more subcommittees. So what I would urge you to do, soon as Ben identifies that there's likely to be a subcommittee called, quickly notify Ben of your availability. And the reason I say that is because we unfortunately had a slight problem on one of the earlier ones. Rather unfortunate, as we know. We were about to commence, but then we found 2 of the members had issues where they had to declare that they either knew one of the objectors or they were involved with the application in another life. So what I would urge you to do is quickly notify Ben so that Ben's got a good choice to choose the 3+1. And that will obviously help officers. So thanks very much for attending, members. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman.